MSW Media.
So now it's clean up on aisle 45 time. And for a long while yet, it is going to be clean up on aisle 45.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 247 of Clean Up on Aisle 45. It's Wednesday. I guess that's October 15th, 2025. I'm Allison Gill.
Hey, AG, happy hump day. It's Harry Dunn here. All right, we got a lot to cover today, including new evidence, which we knew was coming, that exonerates New York Attorney General Leticia James, and federal judges are sounding the alarm over a judicial crisis caused by no other than this Supreme Court.
Yeah, and that's just completely unprecedented. And I know we bandy that word around quite a bit.
Yeah.
But for federal judges to be like, Supreme Court sucks, I mean, like, that doesn't happen very often. So, plus, we have an update on the Hunter Biden Patrick Byrne saga.
Yeah.
And get this, here, I didn't see this covered a lot anywhere else, but a man that was wrongfully convicted and spent 43 years in prison for that wrongful conviction was snatched up by ICE within minutes of his release.
This story is nuts. Yeah.
Disturbing story.
And infuriating too. Yeah.
Yeah. And there was another story. We're not going to cover this. We'll cover this on the Daily Beans, but like somebody was arrested for just not having, or arrested and then ticketed for not having his papers. A U.S. citizen was sitting on a stoop, didn't have his friggin' passport on him. So ICE detained him and then wrote him a $130 ticket for not having his papers on him.
Unbelievable, AG.
Where the frick are we anyway?
Police state.
Before we get into the news, though, we have some new patrons to thank. These are the folks supporting us financially, and we really appreciate it. If you are a patron and you decide that you have the means to kick us a few bucks every month, and support independent media. You get these episodes early. You get them ad-free. You get invites to our galas, invites to our monthly Zoom happy hour calls, which are super fun.
Those are fun. Those are always fun.
This month's is on Halloween night, 7 p.m. Eastern.
Are we telling people to wear costumes?
I encourage costumes, especially if you have an inflatable frog costume. We would love to see it. But these are our new patrons: Stacy, Allison Brisberg, Katie Bob B, Paula Mine, and LP. Thank you so very much for supporting us. We couldn't do this without you. Again, if you want to become a patron, you can do it at patreon.com/aisle45pod. That's AISLE, the number 4 and the number 5, POD. That's where you sign up for that. Harry, how are you?
I'm well, AG. I'm assuming you're doing well. I saw that you submitted your ballot for Prop 50.
I did. I felt very good about it. We were driving around looking for our Dropbox because I don't trust the mail. I don't trust this Postmaster General. I'm like, I want to put it right in the Dropbox, please.
Yeah. No, I'm doing all right. I am really excited. I have the opportunity, and on November the 7th, I'm headed to Omaha, Nebraska, and I will be sharing the stage with some very fine individuals. I'm honored to share the stage and talk with. One of them being Governor Andy Beshear, who I just think is incredible.
He's
from
fantastic.
Kentucky. Just think of him real quick, a Democrat in Ruby Red, Kentucky, who's been elected to 2 consecutive terms as governor. I mean, he's
very popular.
Very popular, and it just speaks to the volumes of the type of politician he is and the type of man that he is, that is able to be a Democrat in Kentucky and win. I think he comes with a winning message, and I'm so excited to be able to share the stage with him. And then no other.
Yeah, but drum roll.
but as much as I talk about Governor Beshear, think the world of him, I have the opportunity to share the stage with no other than the one and only President Joe Biden. And I am so excited. I'm over the moon. And a lot of times when I do these speaking events, I just put bullet points down on my phone, and I get out there and I just, I talk. But I'm actually working on my remarks this time because I have an opportunity to speak in front of the great President Joe Biden, who I just think the world of. And I am just so excited. And also just bringing that energy to Omaha in Nebraska, out there in the Midwest, where so many people are affected and will be affected. When talking about the shutdown that's going on now and what Democrats are fighting for. They're going to be affected by the rising healthcare premiums from the ACA, Affordable Care Act tax subsidies, if Republicans don't agree to bring them back and open, and let alone if they do that, we'll open up the government. And it's very upsetting. A lot of people are thinking about, oh, well, we just can't visit the national monuments, or, we can't go into the Capitol, or this and that. And it's more than just museums and buildings being closed. It's people sitting at home with uncertainty of a paycheck. That even includes the military. Well, obviously Donald Trump ordered that the Pentagon spends its funds to pay the troops, but that's not how they're supposed to get paid. Had to find a way. But outside of people
they're spending research and development money to pay the troops, which is against the Constitution.
Exactly, because Congress controls the purse. And now, I've had the opportunity over the last couple of days and the last 2 weeks since the shutdown to go up to Capitol Hill and talk to members of Congress and interview them on my Substack. So everybody check that out. But most recently, I talked with Lauren Underwood out of Illinois, and she's just so fantastic. And she's a nurse. She knows what it means to be as an employee during a shutdown, not just as a congresswoman. But the main thing about this shutdown, AG, is so many people are going to suffering because of waiting times. Now, a lot of the thing, like I said, the IRS is still open. And by the way, October 15th, it's tax day. So if you file for an extension, this is the day that you have to have your taxes turned in. And, these people that are getting returns, or people that may need appointments at the VAs and all these, your Social Security checks, they're still going to be processed, but it's going to be a big delay in them. Why? Because people are sitting at home and unable to go into work because of the government being shut down. So I talk a lot about that.
The IRS just ran out of money. The IRS ran out of their money. So they are now actually furloughing tens of thousands of employees. Right.
Oh, see? And so there are real life consequences. And I talk with interview a lot of members to try to hammer that point home, that this ain't just about Republican and Democrat. This is about everyday Americans who are going to suffer because of this.
Think about the people who are intrepid air traffic controllers who work 60, 50, 60, 70 hours a week, having to show up to work without a paycheck, can't get a second job.
Your TSA agents too, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so, and that's just one tiny small tip of the iceberg of what's going on. And we had a question the last time you and I spoke about when open enrollment is. Open enrollment begins in November, so
okay.
I wanted to get that information out there. But that, it closes December 31st, and that's it. You're stuck into those rates if we don't extend those tax credits. That's why the Democrats are fighting to make sure that those Affordable Care Act subsidy tax credits are extended. And Omaha is going to be fantastic. I love Omaha.
I'm so excited, and I can't wait. And also leading up to that, AG.
Do you remember the Counting Crows?
Yes, I remember Counting Crows.
Omaha, somewhere in Middle America. I love that song.
I don't know that song, but I do know I'm going to check it out.
Put it on your playlist to listen to on the plane.
Grabbing my phone as we speak and putting that on there. Because that would be great to listen to. As you know what, I like to post a story on like my Instagram or something when I'm taking off, and that'll be a perfect song to overlay on the picture. So thank you for that. But also I wanted to talk about AG No King's March that is coming up, part 2. And we're really excited. Have you seen the messaging that the Republicans are now saying? And this was Mike Johnson and Tom Emmer, the majority whip, has now said that people who attend the No King's Marches are terrorists and they hate America. And that's the talking point now. And well,
you know what that sounds like?
What does that sound like?
That sounds like the manifesto that the shooter who killed the Hortmans had.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man.
That's what that language sounds like to me.
That is what, now that you brought that up, it kind of does sound like that. But I tell you one thing, if that's what they think, then they're going to see a lot of, as they call, terrorists and people who hate America, which is totally the opposite of it. Because there's nothing more American than getting out there and actually protesting and expressing your First Amendment rights. So shout out to everybody peacefully. So shout out to everybody going out to the No Kings March. I encourage everybody to get out, let your voice be heard, and just be amongst and around people who feel the same way you do and that are just pissed off.
It's really energizing. It really is. And I'll be working on a video shortly that should come out sometime this week to give tips and tricks for people with PTSD and anxiety, introverts that have a hard time being around large crowds. I'm one of them. But I have a lot of tips and tricks for that. If you do want to get out to, if you're able to get out to the No Kings rally, and some ways that you can insulate yourself from that kind of
absolutely
disability. So, all right, we have a ton to get to today, my friend. Let's talk about Lindsay Halligan, star of South Beach Tow, and her weak sauce charges against the New York Attorney General Leticia James, who is a badass. And I can't believe this.
Yeah.
But this has just occurred since you and I last spoke, since you and I had our last public episode last Wednesday, in the last week. She was indicted. Tish James was indicted in the Eastern District of Virginia. And over the weekend, the New York Times did some digging and found evidence that she's innocent. It exonerates her. She did not commit mortgage fraud. So let's talk about that. The alleged crime is that she told the bank that a house that she purchased in 2020, August 2020 in Virginia, was a second home and not an investment property. Now, not primary residence. We aren't even talking primary residence. Second home.
Second home.
As opposed to an investment property. According to the DOJ, the interest rate on a second home is lower than the interest rate for an investment property by about 0.815 points. The difference for the $109,000 mortgage that Tish James signed is like $47 a month. I did the math. $47 a month. She plotted and swindled to defraud the bank out of $47 a month. And by the way, the cost of this house is less than the hush money payment Donald Trump made to Stormy Daniels. I just want to put that out there.
Unbelievable.
Again, this is according to DOJ's numbers, by the way. Her monthly mortgage payment on a second home would be about $460. And if it were an investment property, it would be about $507 a month.
$47. So let's look at what qualifies as a second home and what qualifies as an investment property. And this is from Fannie Mae. For the property to be considered a second home, it must be occupied by the borrower for some portion of the year, is restricted to one-unit dwellings, must be suitable for year-round occupancy. The borrower must have exclusive control over the property, must not be rental property or timeshare arrangement. If the lender identifies rental income from the property, the loan is eligible as a second home as long as the income is not used for qualifying purposes and all other requirements for second homes are met, including the occupancy requirement above. And also, it cannot be subject to any agreements that give a management firm control over the occupancy of the property. Fairly easy.
Yeah. So let's go over these. So number one, must be occupied by the borrower for some portion of the year. We'll come back to that. It is restricted to a one-unit dwelling. It is that. It's a one-unit dwelling, so that qualifies. Suitable for year-round occupancy. Yep. The borrower must have exclusive control over the property, so it's not a rental or a timeshare. That's not this, right? And the rental income. You're allowed to have it. You can call it a second home and have rental income property as long as you don't use that income to qualify for other loans, and as long as you stay there, as long as you live there for, quote, a portion of the year. It doesn't say 1 day, 5 days, a month. It doesn't say. It just says a portion of the year.
A portion of the year.
And it cannot be subject to a management firm control, which this does not have. There's no management control over this property.
Yeah.
Now, on the other hand, an investment property, that was second home. This is an investment property. All it says is it has to be owned but not occupied by the borrower. So investment properties have a higher interest rate than a second home. The indictment says, quote, the property was not occupied or used by James as a secondary residence, and was instead used as a rental investment property, renting the property to a family of 3. Now, it doesn't say who the family of 3 is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Further, it says Tish James filed tax forms treating the property as rental real estate. And they're concluding that because she reported some fair rental days and 0 personal use days, and thousands, it says thousand with S in parentheses, thousand or thousands of dollars in rents received. And they don't say how much, and they don't say for what year. And it also says, and claiming deductions for expenses related to the property, further contradicting the second home classification. That doesn't say anywhere in Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, for that matter, that you can't claim expenses for property repair on your taxes. Doesn't say that at all. Notice that Lindsay Halligan, like I said, doesn't say what years or year Tish James made those statements on her tax forms. And that it says thousands of dollars in rents. And it's thousand or thousands. But it doesn't say how many thousands or what years.
Yeah.
Now, that's important because Fannie Mae says, like you said, you can collect rents as long as you don't use those rents as income to qualify for another loan, and as long as Tish James, the borrower, occupies the property for some portion of the year. Those are the only 2 requirements that have to be met.
Correct. So now, a day or two after Leticia James was indicted, the New York Times reported that she bought the house for her grandniece, Nakia Thompson, and her 2 children after they spent a lot of turbulent times in questionable living situations. And that several times a year, Tish James would come for extended stays. Yeah, so she extended stays, not just, hey, I'm here. Hey, y'all all right? All right, I'm home. But no, extended stays. Further, just this past June, Tish James's grandniece testified before a different grand jury that she didn't pay rent. And according to the terms of the document that amended the mortgage, Tish James said she was expected to use the Norfolk property as a second home, with the exception of occasional short-term rentals.
So it could be that, because Tish James owns another home that her grandniece's mother lives in. So let's just say, for argument's sake, that the grandniece that she bought this home for went and stayed with her mom at the other property that Tish James bought for them for a couple months, and that Tish James rented out this property on a short-term basis to someone else, and then her grandniece came back, and that Tish James was there for extended stays, as reported by multiple sources. That means that this is a second home, not an investment property.
That's what it sounds like.
It goes on to say, beginning 12 months after the deed was signed, James had wider latitude to use the property as she wished, according to the document and the experts and the rules. That caveat raises questions about when exactly prosecutors believe that Miss James used the property as a rental. The indictment doesn't include those dates, conveniently. The indictment suggests Tish James collected at least some rental income, saying that she filed a tax form where she reported thousands of dollars of rents received. It doesn't say in what year those tax forms were filed. On New York State annual financial disclosures that Tish James completed, she's required to complete those disclosures as Attorney General. She had only once listed rental income associated with the Norfolk house. Just once. In 2020, she said she'd made between $1,000 and $5,000 in income from it. 1,000. So that might be why Lindsay Halligan put thousand or thousands.
Thousands.
In the following years, she didn't list any income from the house, and her grandniece testified to a different grand jury that didn't return an indictment that she wasn't paying rent to live there. So that's fascinating.
It also speaks to the dumbness. I can't think of the word, the dumbness of Lindsay Halligan. And also, like you said, Leticia James' grandniece had already testified before grand juries. So this was already brought before a grand jury, and which is why Lindsay Halligan is appointed, because the former AG of the Eastern District of Virginia was unable to secure a grand jury there because there was nothing there.
Mm-hmm. Here's another scenario. Let's say she buys the house. Her grandniece can't move in for 6 months. So she turns it into a short-term rental for the first 6 months, makes $1,000, $2,000, reports that on her tax returns, and then moves her grandniece in 6 months later, and then has an extended month-long stay with her. That's a second home.
And she doesn't use that $2,000 or $1,000 or whatever dollars to secure another loan. There is nothing there, and they're going to get laughed out of the courtroom. And I can't wait.
And I'm looking for a abuse of grand jury process. I imagine Lindsay Halligan just said, look, she claimed that she got rent. And then she said it's a second home. You can't get rent on a second home. Ha, 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 ha. And didn't give any of the other details that clearly exonerate her. So we're going to follow this pretty closely because she's innocent. Tish James is innocent. All right. Just like anybody else that Donald Trump is trying to indict. All right. We've got more to cover. We're going to talk about some federal judges talking smack about the Supreme Court.
I am here for it, though.
Yeah, me too. And it's timely. So we'll talk about that in a second. We just have to take a quick break. Stick around. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody, it's AG. You know those weeks when your shoulders feel like they're permanently tense and stuck to your ears and your mind won't slow down? Well, that's when I'm especially grateful for CB Distillery. Their CBD products aren't about quick fixes. They're about real, consistent relief that works with your body. Whether it's stress, soreness, or that constant low-level tension from daily life, they've got something that fits naturally into your routine. So I want to thank CB Distillery for sponsoring this episode. You can get 25% off your entire purchase at cbdistillery.com. Just use promo code CLEANUP. So if you're ready for better sleep, less stress, and feeling good in your own skin, try CBD from CB Distillery. What sets CB Distillery apart is their commitment to clean, high-quality ingredients. Everything is tested, no fillers, no artificial junk, just pure, effective CBD that supports you where you need it most. Over 2 million people trust CB Distillery to help them feel better, move easier, and live calmer. So for me, their Relief Stick has been my MVP. I use it on my neck and my shoulders after a hard day at work, and within minutes, the deep tension melts away. My shoulders drop and my jaw unclenches. And on top of that, their oil tinctures help me balance my mood and focus throughout the day, especially when things start to feel overwhelming. And what I appreciate most is how approachable it is. There's no mystery, no fluff, just clean, effective products that do exactly what they say. CB Distillery has made it easier for me to show up to my daily life feeling grounded and present without the edge of stress running the show. And right now you can save 25% on your entire purchase. Just visit cbdistillery.com and use promo code CLEANUP. That's cbdistillery.com, promo code CLEANUP. One more time, cbdistillery.com, promo code CLEANUP. Specific product availability depends on individual state regulations.
All right, everybody, welcome back. All right, it's hard to convey just how rare it is for federal judges to speak publicly outside their rulings. I mean, it's very rare. It doesn't really happen, especially against the Supreme Court. But that is what's happening now, mostly because of the Supreme Court's use of the shadow docket, where they make fast rulings over cases that aren't fully briefed and with little or no explanation. Judges at a judicial conference this summer relayed some of those thoughts with the Chief Justice John Roberts, saying that their use of the emergency docket gives the government the undeserved feeling that they are winning, which leads to the administration taking those rulings as permission to keep violating the law. That's what we're seeing right now, AG.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what's happening. And the New York Times reports more than 36 federal judges have told the New York Times that the Supreme Court's flurry of brief, opaque emergency orders in cases related to the Trump administration have left them confused about how to proceed in those matters, and are hurting the judiciary's image with the public. At issue are the quick turn orders the Supreme Court has issued dictating whether the Trump administration policies should be left in place while they're litigated through the lower courts. That emergency docket, a growing part of the Supreme Court's work in recent years, that's putting it lightly, has taken on greater importance amid the flood of litigation challenging Trump's efforts to expand his executive power.
Yeah, while the orders are technically temporary, they have had broad practical effects, allowing the administration to deport tens of thousands of people, discharge transgender military service members, fire thousands of government workers, and slash federal spending. The striking and highly unusual critique of the nation's highest court from lower court judges reveals the degree to which litigation over Donald Trump's agenda has created strains in the federal judicial system.
Yeah. Now, according to the Times, 65 judges responded to a Times questionnaire sent to hundreds of federal judges across the country. Of those 65, 47 said the Supreme Court has been mishandling the emergency docket since Trump returned to office. The judges responded to the questionnaire and spoke in interviews on the condition of anonymity, obviously, as lower court judges are governed by a complex set of rules that include limitations on their public statements.
Yeah. Of the judges who responded, 28 were nominated by Republican presidents, including 10 by Mr. Trump. 37 were nominated by Democrats, while those nominated by Democrats were more critical of the Supreme Court. Judges nominated by presidents of both parties expressed concerns. In interviews, federal judges called the Supreme Court's emergency orders mystical, overly blunt, incredibly demoralizing, and troubling. A slap in the face also to the district courts. One judge who compared their district's current relationship with the Supreme Court to a war zone. Another said the courts were in the midst of a judicial crisis. I agree.
Hear, hear. The response to the Times serve as the most comprehensive picture to date about the extraordinary tensions within the judiciary, hints of which have been spilling out into the public. At a hearing in September, Judge James Wynn Jr. of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit said his court was out here flailing as it tried to apply vague emergency rulings from the Supreme Court that left justices in limbo. Ruling on a different case, Judge Allison Burroughs of the U.S. District Court for Massachusetts noted that the emergency orders, quote, have not been models of clarity. That's putting it nicely. And the Supreme Court has so far issued emergency orders in about 20 cases involving Trump's policies. And at least 7 of those orders, the majority offered no reasoning. At public events, some Supreme Court justices have defended their use of the shadow docket as a legitimate response to the increase in swift presidential policymaking by executive order, as opposed to legislation passed through Congress. Offering extensive reasoning or explanation, they argued, would risk locking the court into a position that might not turn out to be its final view. And no, it doesn't. You can ignore an emergency stay order on the docket, and it doesn't hold any precedent.
Yeah, I was reading. I defer to you a lot when you talk about the court system, but that doesn't lock them in on this decision. No, it does not do it. The judges who responded may not represent the views of the entire judiciary, but to have even several dozen judges out of the nation's more than 1,000 district, appellate, and senior judges express such concern about the Supreme Court behavior is highly unusual. 42 judges went so far as to say that the Supreme Court's emergency orders had caused some or major harm to the public's perception of the judiciary. Among those who responded to the question, nearly half of the Republican-nominated judges said they believed the orders had harmed the judiciary standing in the public eye.
Nearly half of the Republican-nominated judges.
Nearly half.
The Supreme Court has harmed the judiciary standing. It is, quote, of surpassing historic significance that so many sitting judges have chosen to weigh in publicly on the Supreme Court. That's what Michael Luttig, Judge Luttig, a former federal judge who served as an assistant attorney general under President G.H.W. Bush, said. He was also on the Fourth Circuit. Some of the judges who responded to the Times questionnaire expressed concerns with the substance of the Supreme Court's orders, fearing critics would see partisanship in the justices' consistent siding with the president. You think? Similar views have been aired in dissents from the Supreme Court's liberal wing, which have called pro-Trump rulings by the majority misguided, dangerous, and an existential threat to the rule of law.
Well, I mean, call a spade a spade. The main complaint voiced by a majority of the judges was not where the Supreme Court was coming down, but how it was doing so. By presenting its emergency orders in just a few sentences with little or no reasoning, judges said the Supreme Court was leaving them without a clear path to assess what the justices were thinking. We ask that all the time. What are the justices thinking?
What are you thinking?
The other judges have those questions too. The result, one judge said, was that the court was expecting their district court colleagues to read their minds about what their view of the law is.
Yeah, just keep your trap shut and don't grant a stay. Then we don't have to try to guess what the frick you're saying. Anyway, again, amazing that these judges are speaking out, even though anonymously, but that so many had an opinion.
I'm glad that they are. Glad that they are because, while it may not influence the Supreme, well, maybe it will. The Supreme Court, those justices definitely see this And they're like, maybe they'll have a conscience and a wishful thinking.
How many of those 6 give a shit, though, right?
Yeah. Well, I know.
I used to think maybe John Roberts did, but I don't think he does.
Yeah.
All right.
But I think one thing, AG, I think is one major important sentence here is the main complaint voiced by a majority of the judges was not where the Supreme Court was coming down, but how it was doing so. So it's not so much about the ruling, which, obviously they can disagree with, but it's how they are doing so. And I think that is one of the most important pieces, because that kind of doesn't paint it as much as partisan as it did earlier in the article.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, we'll keep an eye on this. There's a whole book about it by Steve Vladek called Shadow Docket. If you want to read about it. But we do have that story that we talked about at the top of the show about the man who spent 43 years behind bars, but was innocent, and then snatched up by ICE the minute he walked free. So we'll talk about that after this break. Stick around. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, this story is just absolutely depraved. This comes from the Miami Herald, which is doing some incredible work. If you can support them, I recommend it. On the morning of October 3rd, 2025, Subbu Vidam walked out of the Huntingdon State Correctional Institution, the Pennsylvania prison that had confined him for more than 4 decades. A 64-year-old had spent nearly his entire adult life behind bars for a murder he did not commit. His conviction has been vacated. It was vacated weeks earlier after the court found the prosecutors had concealed evidence that would have dismantled the state's case. The Centre County District Attorney formally withdrew all charges a day before his release, but Vidam never made it home.
Yeah, as he stood on the threshold of freedom, officers from the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, were waiting. Acting on a decades-old deportation order, they detained him and transferred him to the Mosahanan Valley Processing Center, an ICE detention facility in central Pennsylvania. His family, who had prepared to welcome him home, instead learned that Vidam would remain in custody, not as a prisoner of the state, but as a detainee of the federal government. To our disappointment, Subbu was transferred to ICE custody and is currently being held at the Moshannon Valley Processing Center, the family said in a statement posted to on a website dedicated to building support for Vidam's case. So sad.
Here's a quote. The immigration issue is a remnant of Subbu's original case. Since that wrongful conviction has now been officially vacated and the charges against Subbu have been dismissed, we have asked the immigration court to reopen the case and consider the fact that Subbu had been exonerated. Our family continues to wait and long for the day when we can finally be together with him again. Now, Vidam's legal odyssey began in 1982, when he was arrested for the 1980 murder of his friend, a 19-year-old named Thomas Kinzer in Centre County. Prosecutors argued that Subbu had shot Kinzer with a .25 caliber pistol, a weapon that was never recovered, and based their case largely on circumstantial evidence. He was initially arrested in 82 and convicted the following year, being finally sentenced to life without parole. For the next 42 years, Vidam maintained his innocence. His appeals were repeatedly denied, and his case languished until Pennsylvania Innocence Project joined his defense team. In 2022, the project's attorneys discovered previously undisclosed evidence in the files of the Centre County District Attorney's Office, including an FBI report and handwritten notes suggesting that the bullet wound in Kinzer's skull was too small to have been caused by a .25 caliber bullet.
That reevaluation undermined the entire prosecution theory. In August 2025, Judge Jonathan Grine of the Centre County Court of Common Pleas ruled that the concealed evidence represented a constitutional violation of due process. Had that evidence been available at the time, Grine wrote, there would have been a reasonable probability that the jury's judgment would have been affected. 1 month later, District Attorney Bernie Cantorna dismissed the murder charge, saying a retrial would be both impossible and unjust. By then, Vidam had become the longest-serving exoneree in Pennsylvania history. and one of the longest serving in the United States.
My God. So ICE cited a legacy deportation order dating back to the 80s, tied not only to the murder charge, but also to an earlier drug conviction from Vadam's youth. Before his arrest for murder, he had pled guilty at age 19 to intent to distribute LSD, a charge his family described as a youthful mistake. Although that conviction carried its own immigration consequences, Subbu, who was born in India but arrived in the United States when he was 9 months old, was never deported because he was serving a life sentence. But now, after his exoneration, ICE has revived the decades-old order. In a statement sent to the Herald, ICE said Philadelphia officers took Vadam into custody immediately after his release because of his criminal past. Quote, pursuant to the Immigration and Nationality Act, individuals who have exhausted all avenues of immigration relief and possesses standing removal orders are priorities for enforcement. Enforcement and removal operations notes that Mr. Vadam, a career criminal with a rap sheet dating back to 1980, is also a convicted controlled substance trafficker.
ICE said in an email, Mr. Vadam will be held in ICE custody while the agency arranges for his removal in accordance with applicable laws and due process requirements. Mike Trupa, a spokesman for the family, says the move blindsided Vadam's family. They're emotionally reeling from the fact that he could be sent to a country he doesn't know. There's some ancestry in India where he might have had some nominal relationships, but his entire family, all of his family relationships, are here in Canada.
Here and in Canada, yeah.
Yeah. Vadam's legal team has filed a motion to reopen the immigration case and a petition for a stay of deportation while the motion is pending. The government has until October 24th to respond. Over the decades, Vadam built a life of quiet purpose inside prison walls.
Yeah, by all accounts, he was a model inmate. He designed and led literacy programs, raised funds for big brothers and big sisters. He tutored hundreds of fellow prisoners working toward high school diplomas. He became the first person in the 150-year history of the facility to earn a master's degree, completing his coursework by correspondence with a 4.0 GPA. And because Vadam was never formally naturalized, his earlier drug conviction technically makes him deportable under U.S. immigration law. The wrongful murder conviction, now vacated, had kept him in state custody for decades, effectively freezing that process. With his exoneration, ICE argues, the original deportation order can now be executed. To Vadam's defenders, that logic defies both fairness and decency. The government is portraying him as a career criminal and drug trafficker. The defense intends to argue that the totality of the circumstances, Subbu's wrongful imprisonment, his lifelong residence in the United States, and his record of rehabilitation warrants reopening the case.
Yeah, and when we were talking about, we were reading this, AG, that brought me back to talking about the shadow docket, because this is one of those things that needs explanation, that doesn't just say, okay, deport or whatever. Like that's, this
like if a judge blocks his deportation while this is pending,
yeah,
and the Supreme Court lifts that stay, he could be trucked out
immediately. So I think it's important that they have, explanations and actually do their job. And,
that'd be nice.
Tell me about it. But man, what a just a sad story.
43 years wrongfully imprisoned, sets foot outside the prison for his deserved freedom. And what, did he have a sheet of LSD on him in the 80s at a friggin' Grateful Dead show?
This is insane.
And they call it drug trafficking?
Unbelievable.
Stupid.
Unbelievable. Really sad. And I'm wishing the best for him and his family.
Yeah, me too. I'm going to keep an eye on this story for us. All right, everybody, we've got one more story. We've got an update in the Patrick Byrne Overstock.com CEO drama with Hunter Biden. But we have to take one last quick break. Stick around. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back. No Rudy news today, but we do have an update on one of his weird friends, Patrick Byrne, the former CEO of Overstock.com. He's the guy who fell into the Russian-backed Maria Butina NRA honeytrap. He held meetings at his plantation with Rudy and Sidney Powell on how to overthrow the 2020 election. And Hunter Biden sued him for defamation because Patrick Byrne said Hunter sought an $800 million bribe from Iran in exchange for the thaw of $8 billion in Iranian funds frozen in a South Korean bank account by his father, President Joe Biden. Now, here's the kicker. Joe Biden didn't unfreeze those. You know who did?
Let me guess.
Donald Trump. Donald Trump.
I was going to say, is he orange? Yeah.
Yeah. Is he orange? Is he clean? Yeah.
And apparently, Patrick Byrne just stopped showing up to hearings in the case and stopped filing responses for documents needed ahead of the defamation trial that was supposed to start yesterday. So Courthouse News is now reporting that last week, the judge in the case ruled that Patrick Byrne is now in default. U.S. District Judge Stephen Wilson ordered Byrne in default last Wednesday.
Yep. Now, default, that's an order of default. And that order opens the door for a default judgment against the Florida-based millionaire, whom Hunter Biden sued over repeated claims, like I said, that Biden sought that $800 million bribe from Iran in exchange to thaw out the $8 billion in Iranian funds. Okay. And the thing here is this is pretty basic court stuff. If somebody, like if I sued you, Harry, right? And and you just didn't show up and didn't respond and didn't have a lawyer and didn't come to hearings and didn't get deposed.
Yeah.
I can ask for a default judgment against you. And the judge can do that. So that's what kind of is going on here. Right?
Yeah, because you can't just not show up,
Yeah.
In July, when the jury trial was initially about to start, Byrne dodged an attempt by Biden to put him in default when he failed to appear in person at a court in downtown Los Angeles, as his then attorneys had told the judge he would, and instead fired his lawyers and had a new defense team show up for the first time. Wilson refused to allow Byrne's new set of lawyers to join the case at the last minute, noting that the lead attorney, Michigan-based Stephanie Lambert, had been disqualified last year for violating court orders in a Dominion voting systems defamation suit against Byrne in the District of Columbia.
Yeah, and another one was a felon, and you can't. It was just bizarre.
Only the best people, AG.
Yeah,
Only
and
the best people.
We kind of gave some background on this in previous episodes, but the judge, while calling Byrne's tactics a three-ring circus, declined to order him in default that time. He rescheduled the trial for October 14th. So this is like strike two. He also gave Biden's team another chance to subpoena Byrne about his finances. So like that's super due process for Patrick Byrne. Like he didn't show up, his lawyers are felons, but I'm not going to order him in default this past July. I'm not going to order him in default yet. Let's give him one more chance. You can subpoena him again. We'll set the trial. We'll move the trial from July to October. We'll give him another shot to show up, right? That way, if Byrne appeals this and he can't say he didn't give me a second chance. You had a second chance, bro.
Yeah.
That's called tying up the loose ends, right? Now, because public policy requires that trials should be decided on the merits, a sanction of default would be too severe for improper conduct alone. That's what Wilson said last July. But at the hearing last week on Biden's request for financial sanctions against Byrne for having Biden's trial team show up for nothing, no attorney made an appearance for Byrne. So.
Zero attorney showed up. Mm-hmm. So at that point, Wilson told Biden's attorney that he would grant their request for sanctions and order Byrne in default for his continuing refusal to obey the court's orders. Biden is seeking $1 in nominal damages for his defamation per se claim, which doesn't require proof of emotional or reputational harm from Byrne's accusations. However, he also aims to pursue punitive damages, citing what he says is Byrne's malice in spreading a false bribery story. Byrne is no longer represented in the litigation and could not be reached for comment.
Is he dead? Is he hiding? Where's Patrick Byrne?
My God, where is Patrick Byrne?
Yeah, so this trial was supposed to happen in July. I was looking forward to covering it. I was looking forward to Patrick Byrne being totally embarrassed in court and having to pay a bunch of money, but he just never showed up. And Hunter Biden's like, "Can I get a default judgment?" And the judge is like, "Nah, let's give him another chance." So last week was his last chance. He didn't show up again. And so, he's only seeking $1 for the defamation, but we got to see what the punitive damages will be in the default judgment.
Hopefully more than $1,
Yeah. I don't know if Patrick Byrne has any money, but hit him where it hurts, man.
Absolutely.
All right. That's our show. Thank you all so much for listening. We did have there was a tiny smidge of Rudy news. There was some dash cam footage of the accident where the woman rear-ended him when he was on the side of the road and broke his back or whatever. But you can't see anything in it. It's like 10 seconds long. It doesn't really reveal anything, and there's no further information about it. But he's refusing to press charges against this woman, and I'm very suspicious about that. I'm very suspicious why he's not pressing charges against this woman that rear-ended him and broke his back.
That was such a weird story.
What is he hiding? Is it Patrick Byrne?
Hey, Patrick Byrne would have been in the car with him. How
Did
funny
he hit him? Was he dressed as a woman? I don't know. We don't know. We need more details. We need some investigative reporters on the ground to get those details for us, because the accident is just, I was pulled over on the side of the road helping a lady. There was an ambulance. Then I got rear-ended. It broke my back. I wasn't drinking. I was in the passenger seat. Like, what?
What the hell is going on?
Just tell me what
story?
Happened. Just tell me what happened, man. If you're innocent, just tell me what happened. Anyway.
What was Rudy caught with the guy in the hotel room that I'm blanking on the name.
You talking about Sacha Baron Cohen?
Yes, but what was the guy that was
Borat?
Borat, yes. Borat.
Oh, the character. Oh yeah, Borat.
Maybe Borat was in the back again.
Maybe.
Oh my gosh, man.
Maybe it was part of the next movie. Who knows? Anyway, thank you all so much for listening. We really appreciate you, and we'll keep you up to date. We'll have a bonus episode this weekend. Again, thanks to our new patrons. Again, if you want to become a patron, patreon.com/aisle45pod. And October 31st, Halloween, spooky, wear a costume, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 Pacific. And we'll be there for the happy hour. Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
I'm taking a vacation from
well-deserved.
The 22nd to the 29th, but there will be a show. We will be recording the show. My vacations are working vacations. So that's
why I say well-deserved. At least you're just in a place where that's more beautiful than 70-degree all year round San Diego, I guess.
Yeah, San Diego sucks. But I'm going to be having a nice time. But we will be having a show. There won't be any interruption in your Cleanup on Aisle 45 action. So don't have to worry about that. But we really appreciate all of you listening. And we'll see you if you're a patron this weekend. If not, we'll see you next week, right? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, no, the No Kings March. Everybody go out there, let your voices be heard. And like you said, AG said, she has about the PTSD tips and stuff. Be on the lookout for that, because it is real being out in those crowds sometimes, but also it is very therapeutic to know that you aren't the only one pissed off and feeling the way you do. So go find your community, do it safely, come up with your good signs, leave them in the comments. What's your sign going to say? But yeah, be out there and let your voice be heard and be safe.
It's so important. We have to make our voices heard, show them that we're not afraid of their attempted suppression of our constitutionally protected right to peacefully protest. We have to make it so big that the corporate media can't ignore us.
Yes.
And we must show the world that we're not taking this lying down.
Tell me about it. That's right, y'all.
And if you're in California, get your ballot in ASAP. Do it now. Fill it out now. Drop it in the mail or drop it in a Dropbox, because that pulls you off the call lists and the text bank lists and the phone bank lists.
Already
so you won't
voted.
get any more emails about Prop 50 as soon as that ballot gets registered.
The earlier you vote, the quicker your name comes off. Because I knew that when I ran for Congress, because we would go through the roll and it would say already voted. Okay, don't call this person.
Yeah, so, and it helps us so that we don't have to call you. Right? If we're phone banking, we don't have to spend time calling people who've already voted.
That's right.
Get it in as soon as possible. Plus, the mail's fucky. You don't want to trust this postmaster. Just get it done. Get it done. Get it done today if you've got a moment. All right, everybody. We will see you soon. I've been Allison Gill.
Harry Dunn. Thanks, y'all.
Cleanup on Aisle 45 is written, researched, and produced by Allison Gill, with editing by Molly Hockey. Our art and logo design are by Joelle Reeder and Moxie Design Studios, and our music is composed and performed by Adam Orr. Cleanup on Aisle 45 is a proud member of the MSW Media Network, a collection of creator-owned podcasts dedicated to news, politics, and justice. For more information, visit mswmedia.com. MSW Media.